If you are here for the How to Get Involved in Research sort of workshop today, you're in the right place. And we're going to talk about how to find research positions and also what you can do if you can't find a position this year. And I'm going to make sure everything's good. Okay, so as actually people are filing in, we'd really appreciate if you could take a moment to fill out the STAR Scholar pre-survey, and it's very short. You could probably do it right now. And we'll also put the link in the chat for you guys, and then here's a QR code that you could scan as well. Okay, so for people who are just joining, there's a link in the chat that also has this STAR Scholar pre-survey, so you can grab that link there, and also the slides will be available, so you guys can pull up this link later if that's helpful. Okay. So before we get started, a little bit about me. Usually we have a few people doing this workshop, so I apologize because it's just me today. There's a big picture of me here, but I'm a fifth year clinical science PhD candidate here at Michigan. And clinical science program here is like our clinical psychology program. So we are trained as therapists and as researchers. And in case anyone's curious, I sort of look at the neural and behavioral mechanisms of change associated with basically treatment like therapy for youth with anxiety disorders, depression, and obsessive compulsive disorder. So I look at how sort of the brain changes from before to after treatment. And this is my contact info or my email here on the slide. But you can email me any questions that y'all have about STAR or about any of the things that we talked about today. And you can also put questions in the chat, which I'll talk about in the next few slides. So very brief agenda for today. I'm going to first cover some presentation norms, just to what to expect for the next hour, and how to ask questions if you have any. We'll do a brief overview of the STAR Scholars Program as a whole, and then talk about what traditional research involvement might look like, and then what to do if, for whatever reason, there is not an opportunity available for you in the near future, but you still want to make sure that you are able to get involved with research at some point. So these are the presentation norms, pretty straightforward Zoom etiquette, but you can just use mute except when you're speaking. You can use the chat to ask any questions. Dr. Lustig and I will try to respond to questions in the chat. And if not, we will make sure to address your comments or questions at some point in the presentation or via email afterwards. You can use the raise hand function or, again, put questions in the chat. And this is a personal preference of mine, but I would love to see y'all's faces, obviously only if you're comfortable doing so, but it's always nice to see if any of the information is being conveyed in a clear way. So if you are comfortable doing so and turning on your camera, that would be lovely. Okay. So we'll start with that. What is the STARS Scholar Program? So STAR stands for Scholarship, Transferable Skills, Academics, and Research. And the goals of STAR are to prepare students to be researchers, provide structured mentoring, increase the number of students conducting advanced level of research, and also support an inclusive community of students. And the awesome benefits of STAR is that you could be mentored by a current graduate student. There are some really lovely information panels. There's skills workshops, sort of what we'll talk about today. And then we also bring in faculty members often to give scientific talks or facilitate discussions. And then it's really a great networking opportunity as well. And I'm someone who doesn't love sort of outwardly having to be involved in networking. So part of the structure of STAR is it provides some of that for you already just by showing up. So that's a really nice advantage of STAR. The ultimate goal is to prepare you with research skills in order to be competitive for landing any sort of research position. Also applying to graduate school or another sort of research or job where you might use research, like in industry or the private sector job market. Okay, so eligibility for, again, this is still for STAR scholars, the program here. But you're eligible for STAR if you identify with one of these groups that are historically underrepresented in research. And I'm going to put those groups on the slides, and you could meet several of these criteria as well. And then the admissions criteria that we evaluate for candidates for STAR are overall academic performance and also how relevant that might be to psychology and current classes that you're enrolled in. Strong interest in research goes a long way. We want to make sure that the skills that we're hoping to provide through STAR are going to be relevant and helpful to you. So if you're interested in research, that is great and important. That includes if you have any interest in attending graduate school, desire for mentorship from PhD students, and then the years in college. So we do prioritize freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, and that's just because you sort of have more opportunity to benefit from STAR. We could be more helpful to you all if you're earlier on in college rather than sort of if you're about to graduate. This might not be as helpful for you. Okay, so I want to pause here. So if that is of any interest to you, all the things that we just discussed, I really do think it's worth applying. And so here is the information to do so. If you scan this link, it'll take you to the link for the application. And then you could also email this psychstarscholar@umich.edu email if you want more information or having any questions or trouble with the application. And just a reminder that that is due on November 3rd, which is coming up in about a week and a half now.
Yeah, and I will just pipe in here and say, yeah, a lot of our stars go on in complete honors theses because of the research that they've started after they've done STAR, and we now actually have 3 stars who are now University of Michigan PhD students, and 2 of them will actually be mentors for us this year. So it really is a great way to get involved and get your feet on the right path.
Yeah, that's super cool. Okay, I'm gonna also, if we could put the link for this in the chat as well.
So, and I can grab the link for that and put it in the chat to let you continue on.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh, the commitment level for STAR, basically, in the winter semester, it will be most Tuesday evenings from 6 to 8 p.m. And you'll occasionally have very small little assignments, but it'll mostly be things like research the labs that you're looking for, and then do a first draft of your CV or your application so that your mentor can give you feedback and help you make it as strong as it can possibly be. Is it very competitive? We usually have somewhere around 100 people applying for 30 spots, but we try to make a room for as many people as we can. And even if we're not able to include you, then we do have the open events like these, and we'll try to keep you on the mailing list to help keep you informed of other opportunities too. All right, any other questions about our winter program? It is only for current University of Michigan students. So if you've already graduated, the winter program is probably not the right one for you. If you are a Michigan student and you've graduated, you probably can still get in touch with the SAA office, and they can help you out with finding a post-bac position and things like that.
And it's great that you're attending sort of workshops like today. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to move on, but feel free to put any more questions in the chat, and Dr. Lustig will get to them. But we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about research involvement more broadly. So this would just be if you're here today to learn about how to find a research position, now would be a good time to sort of tune back in. But I'm going to cover a few things like why would you even want to get involved in research, how to begin to define your research interest, what various types of involvement in research might look like. And then let's say you do get a research position, what happens from there? So there are many benefits of research involvement. I'm a little bit biased, but I really think that a lot of these skills are transferable that I've gained from research, which is the second bullet point. So let's say you are trying it out and you are just trying to gain some of these skills. I think that's a reason alone to sort of pursue a research position. But you also get to be the one creating knowledge, which is a really unique sort of opportunity, I think, of being involved in research. If you're interested in going to graduate school, this can help make your application more competitive. You can also establish and grow your network, build confidence in these skills. There's like a lot of ways to apply skills that you might have learned independently in a hands-on setting and through research, which I think is very valuable. And then, especially if you're interested in attending graduate school in the future, it's a really helpful opportunity to try out different research positions so you could start to figure out what you might want to do for your own independent research. Okay. And how might you go about, let's say you are interested in research, how might you go about figuring out what you would want to study? And so I'm going to just make one sort of caveat here, which I think I always recommend people. It's okay to be picky and good to be picky because you don't want to wind up in something that you don't enjoy at all. But especially as you're starting to get your first research position, it might not be the perfect fit for what you want to do long term. And I actually encourage people to try those experiences out because it helps them narrow their interests and you can try a lot of different things. But the way that I got involved in research and what I think is a strong way to get involved in research is maybe you had an interesting conversation with a professor or a friend about a topic. There's obviously a lot of interesting things in psychology adjacent fields, or if you took a class that you really enjoyed and they brought up a specific phenomenon that's of interest to you, maybe it's related to your major or things and skills that would be relevant to a dream career. But you could sort of, a lot of people use this idea of like research is me search. So you could pursue things that are interesting to you and research those. I think that's how a lot of people get started as well. Okay, so there are many different types of research involvement, as some of you might know. So especially now in the post-pandemic era, there's a lot of virtual research that takes place, including interviewing people, even in human subjects research, but interviewing people or even conducting assessments virtually with people. But still, a lot of research takes place in person. And then you can do research with people, which is human subjects research, or you can also do research with animals to ask different types of questions or the same types of questions in different ways. And then you don't always have to be generating new data through research. So sometimes you can synthesize existing data through a meta-analysis, which I actually think is a really wonderful opportunity, especially as you're getting started. And I know a lot of undergraduates who have done meta-analyses because it's good experience to synthesize a whole body of literature really and summarize like a common phenomenon, but you don't have to necessarily generate any new data yourself. And the same sort of idea occurs with secondary data analysis, which is data that's already been collected. Sometimes these are much larger data sets, and you could propose to do new analyses on that already collected data. And then the different types of research positions can be paid, especially if you're within a university. You might be able to receive class credit for engaging in research. You could do it more as a volunteer role, or it might be eligible for part of your work study. Okay. And then when to get involved in research, we have all the seasons on here because you can really get involved at any point during the year. And that's really true. I think a lot of people get started maybe with a summer position. Those are perhaps a little bit more unique, but it's not like sort of the fall semester passes and then you're like, oh, I have to wait a whole year. You can really reach out to professors or apply to positions at most times of the year. And then the only thing to think about would just be what sort of time commitment could you make for the position. So a summer position might be more time limited. You might just be available for the summer if you're going home to where you live for the summer. But if you're doing a position at the university that you attend, it might be valuable to be able to stay there for more than one semester so that sort of the training that you do in that lab will be worthwhile for your time as well. And keep in mind that responsibilities vary with experience. There might be certain attendance items that are expected, and this could vary again in post-pandemic. A lot of what I do is still virtual, but just keep that in mind. You might not be able to do a fully remote research position. And then experience could result in a senior and honors thesis. So if that's something that's of interest to you, I think getting started sooner is better. And that could be something that you wind up doing, which is lovely. And then the thesis itself could result in presentations or publications. You could also technically um, do a poster presentation or something of that sort, even if you don't do a thesis. Okay, so how would you find these positions? I know this can be a little overwhelming, but I will say University of Michigan psychology webpage is one of the best that I've seen of any university in terms of like clarity and also listing of positions that are available. I do encourage you to look at psych department websites of any university to try to find positions, but just um, maybe some of those positions can be outdated, so just keep that in mind as you're going through them. Um, but also just looking at faculty profiles and finding faculty that are doing research that's of interest to you, especially if the way that you found your topic of interest was for a class. Looking at that faculty profile would be a great place to start, and maybe seeing who they collaborate with or what other faculty they interact with or publish with, and that might give you ideas of other people to contact. You can always talk to your GSIs or other instructors, STAR workshops, and then, yeah, just consider the big picture. Research takes time, and also the process of getting involved in research takes time, but I think it's worthwhile. But sort of acknowledging that at the start might be helpful, so it's not as overwhelming. Okay, briefly, maybe I'll pause there for 1 second. So people have time to put any questions in the chat. Okay.
Yeah,
All
the
right.
one,
So,
oops, but
oh, go ahead.
beforehand it goes on, I was going to say the one thing that I do want to emphasize is also looking for, you can do psychology research because it is so broad in a lot of different departments. So often looking over at psychiatry, even
Oh,
kinesiology,
yeah.
um, the business school, communications, the law school. A lot of times you can end up doing psychology related research, and then all you need to do to be able to get credit for it is just find a psych faculty member who's willing to serve as a secondary mentor and a sponsor. If all else fails, hit up me. And I'm usually able, after I talk with you about your project, to make sure it's psych related enough. I'm usually happy to help sponsor you, to help you get the psych class credit that you need for that.
Yeah, those are great points. Okay, so I'm going to briefly walk through my research trajectory, but I just want to preface this with this is not necessarily everyone's experience. I feel like I did this maybe in a more structured, normal way, but the rest of my research career has been all over the place. So um, don't let this be intimidating at all or discouraging. But I maybe it'll be exciting to you. But basically, I started my freshman year. I had no idea what psychology was. I thought it was interesting, but I'd never taken a class in it. And so I just took all the classes that I thought were interesting. And actually, I left class one day. We were talking about a topic that I found really interesting, and I sort of was Googling a few people after the lecture. And that's how I joined my first research lab. And so was able to start in the fall of my sophomore year. And then I actually stayed with that lab for the rest of college. But as I was also staying with that lab and working in that lab, I took a summer internship I guess it was after my freshman year of college, but in a different lab. And then I did a second summer internship after my junior year. And with each of those internships, I was sort of keeping a common theme, but adding on new things that I thought were interesting and maybe ditching some topics that I found less interesting, and also use these opportunities to gain new skills. So, in some of these positions were more clinically oriented. So I got to work with clinical populations, but the lab that I worked in for all of undergrad was a neuroimaging lab, which was really helpful because I always had that skill set, sort of thinking about how to apply that in different settings through other internships or other research assistant positions. And then as a senior, I really didn't have much to show for. I completed a thesis and presented it just within my university, which we have that option at University of Michigan, which is really nice. So that could be something that you think about. You don't necessarily have to go to a big national conference while you're an undergrad. That could be something to look forward to in the future too. But and then I also applied for postdoc jobs, which I ended up taking and working in one for 2 years before coming to graduate school. Okay. Okay. Dr. Lustig added this slide too, which is a great resource. And so I'm going to pause here for a brief second so that you guys have time. So this is for University of Michigan students in Ann Arbor. But if you're interested and available, this is an incredible opportunity where all of those things that we just talked about, where you might have to go digging to try to find, it's available all in one place, right here in East Hall. So if you're available at this time, which I guess is the next one is November 12th at 2 p.m. to try to stop by, and you could network and try to find a position there that might be interesting to you. And there's a QR code to RSVP. And even if you can't make it, maybe check out this link. I'm sure they have information about what types of people will be there. And so you could sort of use that as a way to just get the list of people and contact people that you might be interested in doing research with. Okay, and then if you're not at U of M, or even if you are, these are other great opportunities, like really fantastic opportunities that I would encourage everyone to apply for, who's eligible, but there are summer research opportunities. And the nice thing about these programs is that some of them come with sort of supplemental funding, which can be really helpful, especially if the position requires you to be in a different location for the duration of the summer. And also can just be a good experience. So MSpice and so this third bullet point and also SRAP are also available for non-U of M students, but take place on U of M's campus. So if you're interested in sort of getting more exposure to Ann Arbor or being here, that could be a really fun opportunity. I know people in our department who are grad students now who were at different universities for undergrad, but did those programs. And that's sort of how they figured out that they liked University of Michigan. Okay. Now the cold contact email. I really believe in the cold call, which is now outdated. Now it's a cold email. But emailing professors, and we include this lovely template, which you guys could screenshot and use some iteration of it. Obviously, sort of tailor it to make it feel more relevant to you. But this is how I would contact a professor. So let's say backtrack, you had an interesting conversation with a professor who's your professor. You go to their faculty webpage and you say, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. But then you see another faculty who's doing similar research that actually seems a little bit more interesting to you, and you want to reach out to them to see if they have any available positions. You could send them an email that looks like this and make sure to address the professor formally, but then including maybe your CV is a really good idea, or a resume if that's what you have, to show them what experience you have. But don't be completely discouraged if you don't have any experience. That's expected for a lot of these positions as well. And then just keep in mind that a lot of people might not have available positions at the time. So I think this line in here is really valuable. And it's always good to see if they can put you in touch with somebody else who might have positions that are available. Okay. So let's say you do all of that and you still can't find a position. What are some other things that you could do in the meantime, either while you're looking for another position, or you just want to make sort of the most of your time? There's a lot of different things you can do. And this is a funny meme because I think it does feel like this sometimes at every stage of one's career. But to get the experience, you don't necessarily need to have a formal research assistant position. So that's what I'm going to walk through now. So this is the idea of not pigeonholing yourself. There are a lot of different places to find research opportunities. So that's sort of the first thing I would try. If you can't find a research position in the initial place that you looked, sort of get creative about where you're looking. So there's private research groups that take place, are not affiliated necessarily with the university. So you could look for those positions. You could look in different cities and states if that's an option to you. Like if you know you're going to be going home somewhere for the summer, you could look for a place that's local to where you live. You could look for research institutes, again, sometimes affiliated with universities, but not necessarily. And then, Michigan, for instance, we have Michigan medicine, and there's like a whole other set of opportunities there, just like how we have a psychology department. There's like a psychiatry department at Michigan Medicine that has just the same list of resources of many, many available research assistant positions. So I would encourage people to look there, especially, again, I'm a little bit biased, but especially if you're interested in any clinical adjacent research, that would be an excellent place to look. And then this idea of bench to bedside and translational research, and this is sort of what I was alluding to earlier. Let's say you want to work with humans and conduct research with humans in the future, but don't find a perfect position right away. Still, I think I would encourage you to be open to taking a position with animals, or in a different area, even with humans, that is what your dream is, and try that out, see how it goes. And in that position, you'll learn so many valuable skills that, again, are translational and might help you find sort of your dream research assistant position the next year. And then this I think is really important. So maybe take a second here. This relies on nobody else. This is totally, you can do this independently, which I think is great. And so these are all things that you can be doing on your own time, really, to help strengthen your application for these positions in the future. And again, all those benefits that we just talked about skills that are transferable from research, you could be developing those skills sort of on your own. So really, I think important things would be maybe learning statistical packages or programs like R or SPSS, sort of that idea of being able to read research literature and synthesize it is a really valuable skill. And I like this idea of SMART goals because it can be really overwhelming to just say, okay, let's learn all of the research skills. Again, I've been doing this for 5 years in graduate school now, and there's still so many things that I feel like I have to learn. So the SMART goal idea is to pick a goal that's specific, measurable, achievable, and realistic. So an example of this that I love is it would probably be really intimidating and overwhelming to say, okay, I'm going to carve out a week of the summer to learn to code. Like that's not very specific. Like what program are you going to learn to code in? How would you even know if you made success on that goal? It honestly probably wouldn't be very achievable because it takes a long time to learn how to code fully. Again, like I wouldn't say that I'm there yet either. I'm still learning. And then time limited. So you have sort of a achievable time limited goal for either a day or a week. And so instead of saying, I'm just going to learn to code 1 week of the summer, maybe say for this week of the summer, I'm going to spend 30 minutes a day doing coding practice through Code Academy. And then that's a really specific, it's measurable. You'll feel accomplished because you, at the end of the 30 minutes, will feel like you achieved that goal and it's realistic. And then you might have a whole new skill set after a week in a way that's a lot less intimidating than just trying to learn to code. And same idea here, but try to be specific and focus on one goal at a time, so it doesn't feel like too overwhelming or starting too many new things at one time. Okay. So here is some other hints and tips about how to learn new skills. Or again, like maybe you are interested in learning to code, but aren't sure what program to learn. So one thing you might do is read some papers of a lab that you were interested in, see what types of program they're using when they report that in their methods section, and then figure out that might be the method that you want to learn. You could do this with a statistical method as well. And then Code Academy is great for learning specific coding languages, but you could also learn whole different skills on things like Coursera, or I think it's pronounced MOOC. but it stands for Massive Open Online Course. Dr. Lessing can correct me if that's not correct. Okay, yeah. So you could look at Coursera or MOOC, and I believe a lot of those resources are freely available. So that could be another way to start building technical skills. And I do think it's really valuable, and anyone who joins STAR will get a lot of practice in sort of selling their skills and how to summarize them. But it's really nice to be able to back up the skill ability. So rather than just saying like, yeah, I know how to code, you could say, yeah, I know how to do X, Y, Z in this language or coding language, which could be really helpful. And if you could get any sort of like online certification, a lot of these online courses come with those certifications. That could be a really valuable thing to include with an application for any sort of research position. And then it also sort of helps you figure out a specific goal that you might want to do. Like, I want to take this week-long course so that I get the certification at the end. And that sort of helps, again, make a more achievable specific goal. So literature review, how might you learn how to practice the skill? And also this could be helpful in just figuring out what research interests you. And these are the first sort of chunk of items here at the top with PubMed and Google Scholar are ways that people might find research papers. So you can type in any sort of key terms or topics that are of interest to you into PubMed or Google Scholar, Web of Science, or PsycInfo, and it will help generate, oops, sorry, it'll generate a list of papers or literature that discusses research on those topics that you're interested in. And so you could sort of look through those papers, and then Zotero, Mendeley, and EndNote are great ways to save those papers in a more organized way. And any graduate student will tell you that we rely so heavily on these. I used to use Mendeley, but they're sort of phasing it out. And so I would probably recommend Zotero if you guys were going to start anew or fresh, but also EndNote can be, I know a lot of people use EndNote as well. And so these are just ways you can save your papers and open them up in these programs, and it'll save all your notes on those papers. And that can be so helpful, definitely if you're completing a formal literature review, but it could also be really helpful to just organize papers for a class or for a research lab that you might be interested in and sort of summarize. Otherwise, saving a bunch of random PDFs is not very efficient. And then, let's see. Okay, so other things that you can do or valuable skills that you can learn are becoming really good at Excel, specific stats, or learning how to plot data. These are really valuable skills that I still use today, and I'm sure Dr. Lustig does as well. So these are things that will be helpful throughout your whole career, and I really don't think it's ever too early to start. So you might have exposure to Excel, but you could always learn how to do very specific things in Excel, which might be really helpful, especially if you're in a lab. Great. You find a research position and then you're having a meeting with your advisor and they say, okay, it'd be really great if you could work on this thing in the next week and try to get back to me in a week with that. If you have already learned how to make a pivot table, for instance, or learn specific formulas in Excel, that could really expedite that process for you. And you would feel a lot more confident taking on that task because you would know that you've already learned that skill. Other programs that can be really helpful, is R, SPSS, and JASP. But you could also take online tutorials on these. Again, just making sure that you're sort of identifying specific goals, because I think these programs, there's so much utility, but it's easy to get sort of lost in all the different things you can do. So the online tutorials are probably helpful in setting those goals for you as well, but that could be another option if you like sort of a more structured approach. Okay, and then this is so true. So most things you're curious about or stuck on, especially for coding or for Excel or data analysis, a lot of times you can ask Google, and this has been totally transformed by ChatGPT as well. And so I would really, you guys are truly so lucky to come up in this era to learn how to code if that's of interest to you with ChatGPT. It's a really helpful way to start to learn. I think this exact type of question is something that would be really valuable to ask ChatGPT. And sort of it can help provide you with code or even logic for how you might do a specific analysis in a specific program. And I do think it's important to still learn what that is and why it's putting, why it's suggesting to do the thing in a specific way. But that definitely can be a good launching point. And I would definitely encourage y'all to use ChatGPT for questions like that, especially as maybe you're doing an online tutorial and you have ChatGPT pulled up too to help you get through some of the questions. Okay, so these are some other sort of programs or ways that people collect and administer, or administer surveys to collect data that can be really helpful skills to learn. So Qualtrics and REDCap are ways to, probably you've taken a survey of your own that's in one of these programs. So oftentimes people send out surveys. Those are usually through Qualtrics. And so learning how to actually build that survey so that you could send that out as part of somebody else's research is a very valuable skill. REDCap is similar. And then Prolific and MTurk and also Pavlovia, from what I understand, are ways to sort of administer experiments online and recruit participants to participate in those experiments. So that's also something that sort of emerged in maybe the last 10 years or so as a really valuable way to collect data from a lot of people in sort of a short amount of time. And you could really be instrumental in that research project because you could be the one who helps create that survey or that experiment that's online. And so knowing even what that is or how to create that would be really valuable skill to offer, I think, as a for research positions. And then things like MATLAB and Python are other statistical analysis software programs. And then CyclePy, CycToolbox, and ePrime are ways that people create sort of behavioral experiments. These are usually done in person in the lab. Okay, so this is just some data, speaking of data, organized to show you what are people using, because this can be valuable to see what are some skills that might be valuable for me to spend my time learning. And so we surveyed people in our own psychology department here at University of Michigan, and this is just the distribution of who filled out the survey, basically. So these are the areas of people who responded. So sort of most people were in the cognition and cognitive neuroscience program. And then there was a lot of faculty and principal investigators who responded to the survey, and then also graduate students and lab managers or staff. So again, keep in mind, this was in 2020. It's now been 4 years, so I think these responses might have actually changed quite a bit. But broadly, I think the takeaways are the same. So it looks like here most people are using R, SPSS, and Excel. I think that is largely remained true, with the exception that maybe a few more people have switched from SPSS to R. And then these are the distribution of software that was used for survey creation and data collection. So like I said, the majority of people are using Qualtrics, so that could be a really valuable one to learn. Okay. And then we just wanted to include this here. So obviously, if you attended this research workshop a few years ago, things would have looked a bit different in our recommendations because the landscape of research was quite different. Almost all sort of research was taking place virtually. I think that's still true to an extent that some things have changed, but many research labs have migrated back to collecting data in person. But I think some of those skills that we talked about that would allow you to help run studies online, things like Qualtrics even, which those are links that are emailed to people to complete different data collection. Those things have, I think, become even more valuable in the post-pandemic world. Okay, so these are some other skills sort of that don't fit into any of the categories that we talked about necessarily. So like website design and maintenance is a really valuable skill for a lab manager. So that's another type of research role that people can take on, especially for a post-bac position. and being able to navigate a website or making that website. Sometimes people have websites to help research participants find their research. So that could be a good skill to bring to the table. Knowing how to navigate the institutional review board is certainly very helpful. Any sort of understanding or specific skills in neuroimaging analysis is a lovely skill to have. Language skills, so being able to converse with different groups of people is a really valuable skill to have, and will certainly make you a strong candidate for a lot of different research positions. Any sort of coursework that you've done or readings that you've done outside of class can be a way to build your skill set and knowledge base. And then volunteer work as well. And I think volunteer work, stuff like that, is especially valuable for clinical positions. Okay. So additional training that you could, these, I think I've mentioned some of these things, but you can always ask grad student. That's certainly true. We talked about Coursera, or LinkedIn Learning is something that we haven't talked about yet, but I know a lot of people who have gone through STAR have done various trainings through LinkedIn Learning and enjoyed it. So that could be an option. And I think a lot of the LinkedIn Learning classes provide you with those certificates that we were talking about. So that could be a nice sort of objective demonstration that you have learned the skill that you could include with applications for things. Code Academy, tutorials on a specific app or website. YouTube can be really valuable. There's a faculty member at a research scientist at the University of Michigan, Andy Yan, who I watch all of his YouTube tutorial videos on neuroimaging analysis when I was an undergraduate. And that was how I first learned about a lot of these things. And then you could check professional society web pages and newsletters. That could be especially helpful for just finding these positions in the first place. And then I guess when I mentioned asking a grad student earlier, I thought about specific skills, but asking grad students can also be a really valuable way to even identify research positions or help fine tune your research interests, or they could even help you figure out who might be a good faculty member to reach out to do research with. Okay, so some final thoughts. Stay positive and think creatively. I know we covered a lot of material just now, but I think the overarching thing that I'd like to convey is that you have so many options to develop these skills, and there's really an abundance of resources available either online, through in-person modalities as well. And I think the only sort of thing that would be limiting is saying, oh, it's too much, I'm not going to even try or to start, because I think once you begin any skill learning or any sort of research involvement whatsoever, it'll help sort of bring you to your next position and getting you to a research that you're really interested in and enjoying doing. So this is an opportunity to be thoughtful and carefully select the skills and experience you will develop to prepare yourself for the road ahead. Okay, so a few more things before we formally wrap up. And again, please keep putting questions in your chat so we can get to them verbally if we haven't already. But thank you all for joining. We really appreciate you listening this afternoon. And if you have any questions, again, you can email the the STAR Scholar team at the psychstarscholar@umich.edu email, which I will leave up for another 2 seconds. And then if you enjoyed today's workshop or are interested in gathering a few more friends to join for the next workshop, this is the next workshop that we'll be hosting as part of the fall sort of workshop series. So again, you don't need to formally have been accepted into the STAR program to attend this workshop, and it's on November 7th, which is again in a few weeks at 4 p.m. same time. And this seminar will cover applying to research opportunities, the nitty gritty, and what not to do. So if this gave you some ideas about how to start figuring out what research positions you might want to be interested in and the skills that you would want to develop to make yourself a strong applicant, then I would definitely attend this seminar as well because that will tell you specifically how to apply and how to present sort of those skills in the best light so that you really put yourself in the best position to be accepted for a specific research opportunity. Okay. So the link to sort of register so you get alerts and reminders about that workshop or that seminar is here in this QR code. So I think we'll leave that up because I don't think we have anything else on the slides. Let me just quickly check.
Yeah, if you want to leave that up for a couple minutes while we wait for any other questions, and then you
Perfect.
did have a question asking for the cold email prompt again.
Okay, let me, I will go back to that now if that's okay. Okay, I'm gonna leave this on the screen. If people have specific questions about this prompt, I'm happy to respond to those as well.
Yeah. So one thing I will say as a faculty member, a couple things I would suggest not doing in your cold email prompts is you may not want to start it at this point with, I hope this email finds you well. We also don't want to hear about how your friend ChatGPT is interested in the dynamic interplay of whatever processes. So, particularly like if English is not your first language, it's fine to use it to help you, tweak your grammar and so on a little bit. But we really want to hear from you, and not from the AI. So, I would say use something like this, be genuine in your emails because you're the person that we want to interact with. Do double check it for your spelling. Make sure, if you attach your resume that everything is good there too. Double check the spelling of the professor's name.
And
Those
an
are always
obvious one,
good.
but if you're emailing multiple professors, just make sure you're change the name to apply to the right email.
Yeah,
And
I've
I do
gotten that a
actually,
couple of times too.
yeah, I think one strength or one thing that's been really helpful for me is tailoring the email a little bit. Not so that you have to invest too much time to an email that might not necessarily get a response, but sort of along those lines of making sure that you are actually sending it to the right professor that you intended to, putting in a little blurb about why specifically you would be interested in. I guess we have that in here, but just doing a little bit of research beforehand so you can make that first statement here really powerful and show that you truly are interested in that person's research, I think can go a long way. Because professors do get a lot of these emails, and it's hard to know how many people like truly are interested in that lab versus maybe they're just emailing 10 professors at one time. That's a good question. I always tell people I think it's appropriate after the first time you send an email to wait. I'm actually really curious what Dr. Lustig would say, but I usually recommend like a week and a half to 2 weeks to send a follow-up email. But I do encourage people to send follow-up emails. I personally don't feel like it's annoying. I think it's good to continue to advocate and show interest, that you'd like to work with them. At that point, I think after a second email, you probably don't need to keep emailing them.
Yeah, that's probably what I would say too. I mean, we do get busy and overwhelmed. Like, I know I have been like I was traveling last weekend and I come back and my email inbox has exploded to 250 messages. And it just takes me a while to get through all of them, to be perfectly honest. Or we also get busy around midterms and so on. So a good way to write a follow-up email, often find your first sent one, and then I would just hit reply and just say, hi, Professor, I know you're probably very busy. I just wanted to check in on this. If you don't have any positions, that's okay, but just checking in. I'm really interested in your lab. And that will usually make us feel guilty, and get us to respond. And again, don't feel bad. Like sometimes we do just get overwhelmed. People have things happen in our lives. A lot of professors, we are in the age range where our parents are getting older and things too. And so, don't take it personally if you don't get a response. You may not know what's going on with somebody. So
Also, a little bit of a life hack, again, takes a little bit more upfront time and work. So you have to decide how many positions you want to do this for. But you could also look at if it's the faculty member that you're emailing is part of a research lab. Oftentimes, a research lab will have a lab manager. And I sometimes think it's worthwhile to add the lab manager either as a CC, especially on a second email, and just they might be able to forward it directly to the PI or the head faculty member to see it.
Yeah, I would say look for the lab managers, also look for the graduate students,
Yeah.
because often it's often the graduate students and the lab managers who are leading and who'll be working with you the most one-on-one. And so, I usually I talk with everybody who joins my lab, but I defer to my lab manager and my graduate students when we're making the interview decisions um, on a lot of that, because they're the ones who will work with them the most. One thing I want to emphasize for applying to STAR, because I've since we had some questions about that, we definitely don't want you to feel intimidated if you don't have research experience about applying to STAR. Like, that's what we're here for. So we are a pre-research program. Like, our whole goal is to help you get prepared to apply for research positions and find the ones that are going to be a great fit for you. So yes, it is just for the winter semester. And then you will also, so we will keep the alumni of our programs. We keep them on an email list on our email lists. And you will also get occasional updates from me about different opportunities and positions that become available too afterwards. So in that situation, you usually continue on. And also, will usually make an amazing connection with your graduate student mentor. And many people continue that mentoring relationship onwards, even after the formal program has ended.
I'm happy to hang out here for another 5 minutes or so too if others have questions. You can either unmute and ask the question. I think that's fine now. There's a smaller group here, or you can put it in the chat. But thanks everyone for attending. Thanks, guys.
Labs for trauma and resilience. Hannah, that might be up in your alley.
Yeah.
Clinical, yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Luke Hyde and Dr. Chris Monk are people that I work directly with that do study those topics or adjacent to those topics, especially sort of in a developmental, sort of a younger
Mhm.
population about how early life adverse experiences can affect various things. I guess those are more cognition or neuroscience related, but yeah, I would look in the clinical area for those types of labs or even in psychiatry,
Yeah, I
which
was
again
going to
would be
say
at the medical
psychiatry
school.
and the VA hospital too, maybe,
Mhm.
because there'll be a lot of work for PTSD over there. Any other final questions?
Hi, can I ask a question like this?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you. Um, you mentioned a mailing list for the STARS program. Can we join that now, or is that only for participants of the?
Oh, so the mailing list I was referring to earlier is for the STAR alumni. But let me find to get on our list, just to get notified of the other sessions. I think you can just email it to starscholars@umich.
Okay, thank you.